Welcome back to a new episode of the Animal Liberation Hour, brought to you by Animal Activism Mentorship. We are so grateful that you tune in every week to be inspired by the diversity of impassioned guests we have on our pod. It's crucial to AAM's mission as a free multinational program that supports and uplifts aspiring and seasoned animal rights activists alike. From one-on-one mentorships, free workshops and trainings, to this podcast, AAM seeks to empower humans to create the world they envision, where all animals are treated with respect and compassion. Chatting with folks who have mentored and inspired me as an animal rights activist brings me indescribable joy. And I'm so grateful that one such mentor in my life took time out of their busy day of saving the magical creatures of our world to talk to us today. The one and only Tylor Starr is here with us, and I couldn't be more ecstatic. As an avid listener of podcasts myself, Tylor is by far one of my most favorite podcast hosts. From the fun and lighthearted Chick Peeps podcast to the hardcore Radicals and Revolutionaries podcast that documents the history of the Grassroots animal rights movement, Tylor is dedicated to transforming these valuable insights into actionable change. Tylor is also a hardcore Harry Potter fan and uses that deep connection with the Harry Potter fandom community to encourage them to acknowledge and respect the beautiful magic of the creatures whom we inhabit this planet with. He co-founded the Protego Foundation, an animal rights nonprofit organization that was inspired by the wizarding world. When I think of Tylor, the first words that come to my mind are thoughtful, intelligent, and kind. And I'm sure that this conversation will leave you, the listeners, feeling the exact same. So what are we waiting for? I bring you today's guest, a magical force of compassion, and my good friend, Tylor Starr. So never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would be interviewing one of my favorite podcast hosts, the one and only Tylor Starr. Welcome to the Animal Liberation Hour.
Wow, what an honor. I am very, very excited. This has been probably the thing that I've been looking forward to the most this week, so thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? I know before I go down the rabbit hole of asking all of my questions and you spewing out your wisdom, I really must say, Tylor, that you are the reason, or one of the most influential reasons, why I found the courage to follow my calling to leave graduate school, where I was so not happy, but felt like I was culturally and societally pressured to stay there, because I said, hey, I want to get into biomedical research so I can change the experimental models for animals. So I need to get through this, but I hated what I was doing. And I think I just reached out to you on Instagram because you would, when I would post on, one of the podcast you were on, the Chick Peeps podcast, which I'm sure we'll talk about later in our conversation, I would, post some comments and stuff, and you would like it and you would respond to it. So I was like, this person works at PETA, right? Or used to work at PETA. So I'm just going to DM this person and see if they have any advice. And yeah, you got back to me with such a kind and thoughtful response. And you really told me not necessarily what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear, in that, my message to you was, hey, this is my dilemma. Tell me what to do. Figure out my problem. And you were like, you can help the animals by working in the animal protection movement without having to lose your love for science. You can still be in science and still do it. But, I felt like I still had that power of making the decision, as opposed to some folks would be like, just suck it up, get through it. You get a degree from it. And some people were like, oh, if you're not happy, just leave. But I think your response was so different. And not long after I here I am at PETA and just loving the work that I do, working exactly in the space of revolutionizing how experiments are done, the scientific paradigm. And I don't want to make this podcast all about that, but I just feel like I had to just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being that that really positive influence on me. And I can't wait to talk about the people who have influenced you in a similar way.
I'm at a loss for words, and I'm getting so teary-eyed listening to that.
And that concludes our episode.
I mean, I had the opportunity to thank my biggest vegan inspiration on the Chick Peeps, and I was like, oh, I'm like thanking him so much for everything that he's done to like inspire me. That must feel so good. But now I'm like in that position, and I'm like, oh no, that's so great to hear. I don't know. You do this kind of work to help animals and hope that you change the world. And hearing stories like that, where you've inspired just one person to do that with you, is everything that you need. So thank you so much for that, Shriya. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And I think we can keep going back and forth. So let's just dive right into it.
Yeah.
So you do so many things. Like I said, I learned of you through one of my favorite podcasts, the Chick Peeps podcast that you had hosted alongside the one and only Ivana Lynch, also known as Luna Lovegood. And so I think what really drew me to you and the work that you do was how intelligent, how thoughtful, and how practical yet unapologetically abolitionist your responses were to some really tricky questions. So I really want to go into how you made your journey into thinking about these questions and where that original source for animal rights started, and kind of go through your own story.
Yeah. I mean, there have been so many different moments throughout my life that led me to wanting to help animals, but I didn't really get into it until I was about 17. And I always kind of start off saying that, I grew up in a very conservative part of northern Colorado, and I never felt like I fit in anywhere. And I credit that kind of outsiderness, if you will, to why I am an advocate for so many other groups and for a better world. While other kids at my school were listening to like country and rap, I was listening to like punk and hardcore songs that, that were in the soundtracks of my favorite Sega video games. And a lot of these songs center on fighting the mainstream, fighting capitalism, and advocating for protecting yourself and advocating against self-destructive, behavior. And that's what really led me to another really important part of my life, which is being straight edge. I claimed straight edge in 2006 when I was a freshman in high school. And, for listeners who don't know what straight edge is, it's a personal philosophy that is stemmed from the East Coast hardcore scene of the 80s and 90s that really rejects the consumption of alcohol, tobacco, and recreational drugs in an effort to like preserve and protect your sense of self. And so it's a very heavy and dedicated way to live life. But it means so much to me, and it means just as much to me as my veganism and my anti-oppression beliefs. So I mentioned kind of both the outsiderness and being straight edge because those kind of led me to animal rights philosophy, and advocacy and all of that stuff, because you'd often find that bands who were straight edge also were vegan or had like animal rights literature at their merch tables, shit like that. And so I really do have to thank the punk and hardcore scene for shaping who I am and what I believe in to this day, because nothing is as anti-capitalist and anti-establishment as being, a vegan, straight edge atheist, animal liberationist. So, that music really, really
in rural Colorado.
Yeah. because I needed to stand out. I wanted to be proud of who I was as an individual, right? And I don't know. And it was all kind of compounded by the fact that I lived in a trailer park and we had a quote unquote outdoor cat, right? And she wasn't spayed and she had kittens in the trailer next to ours. And, the middle of summer, in like the insulation of a trailer, it's very hot. And so, of course, she had these kittens there and they died. And so, the neighbor came over and he was like, hey, your cat had kittens, under my trailer. You need to come get them out. And so I was, maybe 11 or 12. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to go help my parents. But my little brother and sister couldn't because they were young and my parents didn't want them to see, us pulling dead kittens out of underneath the trailer. And, I remember my mom crying and I was very upset. I was very sad. And then we went inside and we ate chicken, right? And that was the first time that I could really remember asking myself, why did we just cry over these animals but not the dead bird on our plate? But of course, it's one of those things where it's just like, okay, well, I guess this is how it is. And come to find out, no, it doesn't have to be that way.
Wow. I think during that really impressionable time of anyone's life, there's this urge to fit in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that you mentioned that, I wonder what you think and or what you think currently made you different and that you wanted to stand out. You didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. You wanted to listen to different kind of music, and rather than feeling like, oh, if I do something different, I might be picked on by my friends at school, or I don't know. I'm just curious as to what makes someone really feel like, hey, this is who I am, and I want to be different.
Yeah. I don't know. I've just always been somebody who's been proud of being myself, not necessarily being different, right? If I have the same interests as somebody else, cool, that's sick. I'm not going to be like counterculture for the sake of being counterculture. But I just really have always defined myself by the things that I believe in and the interests that I have. And if people don't like that, that's fine, And I think that's the cool thing, right? Is that I don't want to be the same as everybody else, because we should all be proud of being different. We should all be proud of being individuals and having individual life experiences and that kind of thing. And I would never say that my younger self would have put that so, I don't know, eloquently, but back in the day I was just like, I saw what was happening around me and I was like, that's not interesting to me, but what is interesting to me? What is it about these bands that I'm listening to in Crazy Taxi that are inspiring me? What is it about fast, aggressive music that has a political slant that is interesting to me? And I've now found that it really is just because all of these bands are trying to advocate for a better, like almost kinder world. And that's something that I've always wanted as well.
Yeah. And was your immediate family supportive of your ideas and just your being yourself at the time?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because ever since those early days of my youth, I've always been incredibly outspoken. I came out to my parents in, I think it was like elementary school, as an atheist, and I was very firebrand about it, very vocal about the kind of oppression I was seeing around me related to religion, and I fully believe that I would have felt even more empowered to come out as bisexual earlier had I not grown up in that kind of environment. And then, of course, straight edge kids, we're kind of known as being a bit of a dick when it comes to our views on drugs and smoking and that kind of stuff. So I've just always been somebody who's not shy about expressing my opinions. And so when I told my parents that, I was going vegetarian and then a month later I was going vegan, they were just like, yeah, that's in line with who you are.
It's like, okay, let's mark that one off the list.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so fun. Yeah, and so we've talked about how the punk scene and creating a better world, anti-establishment, anti-oppression was kind of rooted in the many areas that inspired you growing up. And from my understanding of your work, outside of your own nonprofit work, you're really an advocate for um, learning from our animal rights history, and you're curious about our animal rights history and grassroots and direct action and their origins. So, do you think that your connection with these at the time, or what we would consider quote unquote radical ideas, was also what drew you to this more on the grounds, direct action, you know, form of activism? And yeah, I'd like to know what drew you into that and that trajectory into you working in the space of animal rights.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of say all that stuff about where I came from to say that I've never been somebody to talk the talk but not walk the walk. Right? There's bad out there, and there's bad out there happening to animals. And when I learned like about animals in laboratories or animals who are skinned alive for their fur or beaten with bull hooks, I promised myself that I wasn't going to be somebody that just got sad about what was happening. I was going to be active against what was happening. And so, whenever a new activist kind of drops into my DMs and asks me what they can do to help animals after they just learned about what happens, it's always, always, always the exact same. I ask if there's a local grassroots group that they can get involved with, and if not, can they start their own? Because I started the first ever animal rights group at my university, and I felt so empowered. It was an outlet where I could harness my anger, my energy, and say, I'm not only just going to let that sit in me, I'm going to get out there and do something about it, So I tried to see if there was a group that already existed that I could join. And when I found out that there wasn't, I was just like, well, I don't know if I can swear on this, but, well, F it, well, fuck it. I'm going to do it then, and that has always been my motto in life ever since. If there is something bad happening out there, we can't sit by. We have to do something, literally anything. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'd rather have 10 meat eaters protesting outside of a fur salon or a circus or breaking into a laboratory than I'd rather have 100 privileged vegans sitting back looking down their nose at people who still eat animals because they can't afford vegan food. Shit like that, where the grassroots gives folks the opportunity to take action now, regardless of where they are kind of on that anti-speciesism spectrum, right? I want people, if you can, to be active. And so after I started that group, I was like, damn it, I want to make this my full-time job. How can I make this my full-time job? And I was friends with one guy who worked at PETA. He was an action team coordinator his name was Eric, a fantastic human. And I was like, okay, what did Eric study so that he could work at PETA? I'm going to study that too. And at the time, I was at the University of Northern Colorado, and I was a music composition major. And I was just like, what the hell am I doing with this? This is not what I want to do, And so I saw that Eric was a philosophy major, and so I changed my major to philosophy because I was like, oh yeah, sure, animal rights, philosophy, I got this. And so it was between my sophomore and junior year, and I was like, I'm going to get a summer internship traveling with PETA on the Vans Warped Tour. And I did, and it was amazing. Loved that experience. And I kept telling the people at PETA who I was, reporting to, I was like, I'm here because I want to work at PETA. And they were like, okay, yeah, okay. And sure enough, a position opened. They asked me to apply for it. I applied for it. I got it. I worked there for 6 years, and it was amazing. PETA will always have a very special place in my heart because they're just my favorite organization, and I loved it. And fantastic stuff. So sorry, that was a little rambly, but
no, not at all. And like, I can see the joy kind of emanating from your face, and I could hear in your voice too, like how excited and motivated this makes you. And yeah, I resonate a lot with what you said. I know I've only been at PETA for just over a year now, and it's I love it so much. And I also realized that I was, I'm hearing a lot of criticisms of different animal protection groups and, feeling like, oh, what if I join a certain group, like, is that going to dilute my ability, or is that going to dilute my credibility, et cetera, et cetera? And then again, that's giving more power to those who want to, I guess necessarily they probably want to silence those who are actually out there speaking out against animal oppression. So once I realized, like, why am I giving them the power to dictate where I choose to fight for animals? And yeah, I think hearing your perspective, and I've already, even though I hadn't interacted with you personally, I felt like just you on podcasts and what you had to say, I already trusted you in a way to go by, okay, if Tylor said that this is going to be a good place to work at, I believe.
Well, that's good. Would have sucked if that wasn't the case, huh?
Yeah, I know that would have. We probably wouldn't be here having this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, no, not him. Yeah. So from like with I really do like what you said about you'd rather have 10 meat eaters out there protesting for or circuses or zoos or other forms of animal exploitation, because I think they're also probably the ones who are going to be more likely to receive the message about the use of animals in for food and other forms of consumption. And yeah, I think the whole idea of just do something and be active is also the core of what we do at Animal Activism Mentorship. And that's also how the whole idea of such a program started during the pandemic, where a lot of in-person actions were being canceled because of the pandemic, and trying to figure out, okay, how the original founding team, they were trying to think about, okay, how can we safely still mobilize the activism community or inspire new vegans or those on their vegan journey to become active for the animals, because it's one thing to buy Daiya cheese and just have a vegan pizza, but it's another thing to go out there and protest animal abusers. So yeah, I really do resonate a lot with what you said, and I'm excited that, this could just be me entering this space, that I feel like, oh my gosh, now everybody's talking about direct action. Everybody's talking about being active for the animals, but it could just be like, oh, now I've actually met the community where people are talking about it more. I don't know.
Right. I mean, we saw a big dip in grassroots. Just in the grassroots, we saw a big dip in pressure campaigning and organizing, but I'm really so happy to see it coming back in the last couple of years. I don't think that it's just because you're now entering the space. I think like groups like CAFT and of course Animal Activism Mentorship, are so refreshing and inspiring to see, give activists the opportunity to turn that passion into action. That's all I want to see. And I'm definitely seeing it a lot more. So I would definitely say it's happening more.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have any thoughts as to why you think, when the animal rights movement, I guess, really entered the spotlight with a lot of these grassroots direct action groups, there was so much awareness coming into this. And then there was a shift towards, I guess, like, quote unquote, safer, less confrontational forms of activism, which is, I think, very important as well. But it also came, I think, at a cost of the direct action space. And now now we're kind of seeing a revival of that. We're having conversations about how we can, come together. And I really like the analogy that your quotes, co-host, just to kind of pull his leg a little bit, Jake Conroy, likes to use the analogy of the puzzle of tactics and tactics being pieces of the puzzle and strategy being how we assemble the puzzle for the overall big picture of what is going to be most effective. Yeah. And now we're having more of these conversations of how outreach, education, vegan restaurants, the reducitarian message, like how all of these can come together in addition to direct action and grassroots mobilizing to create a more collective movement. And but I'm also curious about your thoughts on that trajectory. Like, what do you think kind of dipped the trend in one direction versus the other? And I say trend because I just couldn't think of another word.
No, yeah, I get what you mean. Like, the pendulum definitely swings, right? We saw this, keeping it kind of on brand, right, with Radicals and Revolutionaries, right, our animal liberation history podcast. We've talked to many of our guests about direct action and underground activism, and direct action in regards to that underground illegal, activity has definitely taken a huge hit thanks to, the government's crackdowns all over the world and pressure on activists and groups. But that doesn't mean that it has stopped, right? We definitely don't see it as much as we used to. But I mean, just this week we saw some underground activists liberate, I think it was around 50 deer from a deer farm in Florida, which is amazing shit because you can't do a lot of that underground stuff as often as you used to back in the day. The technology is just way too advanced. And of course, the stakes up against the activists are much, much higher in terms of the prison time that you'll be facing. So we don't see underground direct action happening as much as I would like. But, when I do see it happen, especially in the US, it is so amazing, so inspiring. And I think that pendulum is definitely swinging back from, what it used to be, where it was like, I'm going to share my vegan burger on Instagram. That's going to make such a huge difference, right? And it's like that there's a place for that. Of course, I always say that there's a place for every form of activism, but we just can't rely on one form, right? As Jake says, it is a puzzle. How we strategically put that puzzle together, that's how we're going to achieve animal liberation. And so it needs to be a hand-holding kind of thing, right? And I'm so excited to see that pendulum is now swinging back towards radicalism in the form of we're seeing more disruptions, we're seeing more protests, we're seeing more people be, as I like to say, it's like my covert word, rowdy. When we're organizing these kind of things that are a little edgier, I'm always like, hey, do you want to get rowdy at this place? Let's slap something together, something like that. So my close knit of activist friends have come to know that rowdy means we're going to maybe get in trouble. So
some good trouble.
Yeah. A little fun. So it's nice to see that pendulum swinging back because I do think that there is so much more of a resurgence, kind of in learning about our history, and activists are like, damn it, I wish that I was alive during that time because I would have wanted to do that. I would have wanted to do this. But we recognize it's just not the case anymore. You can't, do a smash up and only get a week in jail. Something like that would get you months, maybe years in prison. And so we're seeing activists say, okay, what is the legal boundary that I can push then? If I can't do something straight up underground illegal, what can I do? And that's where I think we're seeing a lot of these amazing younger firebrand activists coming in and saying, I am going to disrupt this Home Depot for selling glue traps. I am going to stand outside, this first store. I'm going to make sure that Zara and H&M know that they shouldn't be selling fur and skin of animals, that kind of stuff. It's so good to see. And I'm really, really excited about all of it.
Yeah, I think it just took, not saying it just took this for this to happen, but like just seeing examples of the fur industry slowly coming down and seeing the activism that happened behind that is probably reviving some spirits. I don't know. I guess we'll never know definitively what is driving people to really look into this form of activism, but it's working. And like whatever the corporate statements say, it's working.
That's right.
So yeah, now I know we briefly talked about your co-host on the Radicals and Revolutionaries podcast, Jake Conroy, also former guest on the Animal Liberation Hour. We love all the work that you both do individually and together with this podcast, tracing the history of the grassroots direct action form of activism, tracing the origins of the Animal Liberation Front. So many remarkable stories. So listeners, I highly recommend that you hop on that podcast as well, because you really hear stories from those who have spent years in prison for liberating countless animals, causing maybe probably over millions of dollars of economic damage to these animal exploiters. And just hearing their stories and their laughs and their anecdotes is just, it's so lovely. And I'm just so excited for all of the other incredible activists that you're going to be featuring on that podcast. So I guess when I listen to this podcast and I'm looking at, and I can only imagine what it looked like at the time, right? Because we weren't there. And what I am seeing now, this resurgence of grassroots direct action, and also not so much overt liberation of animals from either farms or laboratories, etc. And we're also seeing a growing conversation around diversity and inclusion in the animal rights movement. And that's not only in terms of thought, but also representation, the physical representation from other members of oppressed groups. And I think back in the day, we saw those in these more higher risk actions coming from more privileged sections of society, where I guess the repercussions might not be as drastic as it would be for those who are already experiencing either some form of oppression or have an extra critical eye on them. And I think that's probably still the case right now. I think it very much, not probably, it is very much the case right now. Like when I go to some demos and disruptions, those who are probably filming or holding signs, like there's always, safe zones for those who don't feel as comfortable interacting with the police, or who are probably won't be the best idea for them to do a more higher risk action because, of the systems that tend to put one group of society above another. So I know that was a very long-winded entree into the question, but how do you feel that this should inform how we go about with grassroots direct action in today's day and age? Do you think that it's still going to be, let's just accept and say, like privileged white people who are more in a quote unquote safer place to take these high risk actions, and let the diversity and inclusion conversation just not be something that they should, put as much effort into? Or do you think that we should also work towards having representation in direct action, high risk actions? And again, this is not to say that, okay, this is what Tylor is saying, therefore this is how it should be, but more of what are your opinions? Because I know your activism is also very much rooted in anti-oppression as well. So I would like to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah. This is a question that I've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about as somebody who's an expert on animal rights history and the animal rights movement and strategizing and that kind of thing, because it is so important right now, and it's always been important. And I always say that this is the most difficult, but also the easiest question for me to answer, since, I am a white person, and while I do identify as non-binary and bisexual, I'm extremely, extremely privileged and have not faced the uphill battle that our Black, Indigenous activists of the global majority have faced. I obviously wasn't around in the 70s or the early 60s when we can trace some of the roots of our movement to. But as you mentioned, I have had the opportunity to chat with a lot of older activists on the Chick Peeps and even older activists on our new show that we've talked about a little bit, Radicals and Revolutionaries. And I've been thinking a lot about this topic, and this is kind of where I've landed. So the animal rights movement has always been very white. Very white. Thankfully, that is changing recently, where Black, Indigenous activists of the global majority are getting the seat at the table that they have long deserved. And I think the biggest pitfall white activists continue to perpetuate is the idea that there's a cookie cutter mold that fits, everyone. And it doesn't acknowledge the privilege that we have as white people. Taking it back to the Animal Liberation Front or, these underground activists, it's easy to sit in your car for hours outside of a building you are looking to smash up or burn down if you don't have to worry about people calling the police on you for looking suspicious, right? It's easy to not panic when you get pulled over with a van full of dogs in the back if you never have to worry about being racially profiled, shit like that. And so I don't think this only pertains to the animal rights movement. I think it relates to so many different forms of activism. Like, I'm regarded as an expert on the Harry Potter fandom and fan activism inside of it. And obviously many, many folks don't want to go see the new Secrets of Dumbledore film because they don't want to give money to J.K. Rowling for her transphobic views, right? So many activists are saying, oh, just buy a ticket to a different movie and then sneak into the theater that's playing Secrets of Dumbledore. And it's like, okay, while that sounds good on paper, right? Even an action like that can put marginalized communities at a much higher risk than white folks. It's about acknowledging our privilege as activists of the global minority as white people and saying that we can't expect everyone to be able to do, like I said, rowdy, illegal actions that and that we're all going to be, treated the same way. We're not going to be treated the same way. And so I know I'm kind of rambling at this point, but
oh no, I had a rambly question. So I think I was like, I don't even know what my question is. It's like, I know, and we've had brief discussions about this when Radicals and Revolutionaries podcast came out, and just curious about like, it's usually white men who have, and so I'm not saying going to prison is a privilege, but there comes that privilege of a possibly reduced sentence than if you were a member of the global majority. So so I became curious, like, were there people who were not white men who were out there doing these actions, or was it just too risky to even want to get involved? I don't know. And I think that's sort of where my curiosity came from with regards to, okay, probably not then, but are there folks like that now? We're probably not going to know, but is there an opportunity to mobilize and encourage if that's what they're wanting to do? I don't know. And this is just a space where I wanted to put out my thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely see it now, right? We see activists in other countries who are doing amazing, amazing underground direct action work. And one of our guests, Caroline, who's on an upcoming episode of Radicals and Revolutionaries, she has a great quote that says, yeah, a good Animal Liberation Front cell you shouldn't know is there, right? And so, it's hard to say how it is now because the movement has been so, cut out at the knees, if you will. And, because of the government pressure and all this stuff. So it is hard to say now, but, it really was a privileged thing to do back in the day. And I guess one final thing I'll say about acknowledging privilege is really based on something that I used to say that I don't anymore and have actually changed. But if listeners have listened to the Chick Peeps, I used to always say something like, it's a privilege to care, in that to care about the issues outside of ourselves is only afforded to a few who can hold that space because they're fortunate enough to not have to worry about those things affecting, only themselves. But I really don't think that's the case anymore. I think the single mother working 2, maybe 3 minimum wage jobs to support her family totally can and probably does care about a lot of things outside of herself. It's a bit reductionist to say that only the privileged can care. So I've now changed it to, it's a privilege to be an activist, right? And we shouldn't blame or put someone down for not coming to your demo you organized or join you for a leafleting event you organized because they're just trying to exist and live. It doesn't mean they care less than you. It's just that you're more privileged to spend your time standing outside for 2 hours outside of an H&M. The sooner we acknowledge our privilege in our activism, the sooner we break out of that idea that every person who cares can and should do the same actions, and the sooner we'll continue to make space for every person's life experiences.
Yeah, very wonderfully said. And yeah, it's just creating a space to even have these conversations rather than not having them because it's going to be a little uncomfortable or maybe not going to yield an immediate solution is not an option, because otherwise we're not really going to get anywhere. We're just, going to stay chopped down at the knees.
Exactly.
So you've really, like I said, have been a mentor to me even before I connected with you personally, but I'm curious to know who have been mentors along your journey. We've talked about inspirations as a general idea, but just individual mentors who, may have given you some advice or some advice that you wish you'd received earlier.
Yeah. God, this is probably the hardest question you've asked me so far. And I think it's so hard because I became an animal rights activist in 2010, right? Kind of right as we started to see more and more grassroots groups pop up again and get active. And so I didn't really have any animal rights mentors. I was still in my little northern Colorado conservative city, so I had to be my own mentor. And I took great inspiration, though, from activists I could learn about in any of the Animal Liberation Front and animal rights documentaries and books I could get my hands on. People like Kevin Jonas and now Jake Conroy from the Shack 7 were pivotal in my activism. So it's wild to think that I now co-host a podcast with Jake now. There are times where I have to be like, oh my God, how sick is this? But, I can still remember watching videos and watching Behind the Mask in my college dorm in 2012 all about Jake and the Shack 7 and just being awed by people who would sacrifice everything to save just one animal, Of course, PETA is the organization that I looked up to very, very early on. I watched the documentary I'm an Animal, which is all about Ingrid and all about PETA. And so Ingrid Newkirk is a personal hero of mine. So all folks I've had the honor of meeting and interviewing and becoming friends with through my podcasting work, but nobody directly back in the day. It's honestly why I always try to make myself as open and available as I can now, because I want to help the next Tylor in the middle of nowhere who has just learned about the atrocities of animal testing and, wants to stop mice from being drowned in experiments, but doesn't have a group that they can join. I want to help them change the world. I can only hope I help enough. If I can help one person get active for animals, I'd be happy. I'd be satisfied. Not satisfied, but I'd be happy because I want a million more people to be active for animals, but I'd be happy, right?
Yeah. And I think that's what mentorship is all about. It doesn't necessarily have to be one person guiding you through every step of the way, but just someone who did plant a seed and you're like, and seek inspiration from them. And you never know. You never know who you inspire. So I think that's a very beautiful and thoughtful answer to those who have mentored you, whether they knew it or not. So I guess when it comes to advice that you would give to the community, or any advice that you have that you wish you had received that you would like to relay to the community, what would that be?
Do it even if you don't think it's going to be perfect. That's my something that I live by, and something that I will always tell new activists, people who are like, I just learned about this. What can I do? Okay, and then I always, go look for a grassroots group. If there isn't one, start one. And they're like, well, how do I know that, what if I don't do it right? What if, something doesn't go right? I'd rather have somebody giving 100% effort, but failing, but, still trying. That's how it always is. Do it, even if it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah, because otherwise nothing's going to happen. You can just sit and worry all day and nothing's going to happen. Like, what if it does go right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Definitely. So you did touch upon Harry Potter, and of course, I'm not going to let you go without let you have your moment to geek out about the Potter world. I clearly know my lingo very well, so
yeah, you do great.
So I find it so fascinating that, as a fan of the Harry Potter world, that you took inspiration from that and let that spark your own creativity and use that towards helping the animals. Mm-hmm. So how did Harry Potter influence you in such a way, and kind of guide you towards having a wizarding world themed nonprofit?
Yeah. So I grew up, like many people my age, just in love and obsessed with the wizarding world and Harry Potter and the books and the films and everything. And as I started, because I've reread the entire series 137 times, I've started to notice as I got older.
Kept count.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. But I started picking up different messages in the books, right? So many different things. And one of them was how we treat other than humans. And that was eye-opening to me in so many different ways, because, I started having different thoughts about animal rights, based on the music I was listening to and the world that I was starting to surround myself with. And so I started to see those messages pop up in Harry Potter more and more. And so in 2014, I was just like, I've got to do something with this, right? There's so much excitement around the media that we consume. What if we could harness that excitement? As one of my old friends, Andrew Slack, used to say, what if we could harness that fan excitement and use it to inspire change in the world? What if, in addition to us waiting for the midnight release of this new film, what if we also took the message that was in that film and applied it to our real life to make the world a better place? And so in 2014, me and my friend Catherine, we co-founded an organization that would later become the Protego Foundation. Protego is a spell in Harry Potter that is Latin for I protect, and it's a shield charm. And so we felt like that was the perfect name for our organizations, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to protect, we're trying to shield, we're trying to advocate for the magical creatures in our non-magical world. And so now we cater specifically to one of the largest fandoms in the world, the Harry Potter Wizarding World fandom. And we're saying, hey, you remember how Hermione was so passionate about helping elves? You can help, and like you can help the magical creatures in our world just like Hermione did. Or how Hagrid was so upset when Buckbeak was going to be killed? You can also help animals in our world who are going to be killed. Stuff like that, where we take these messages in our favorite book series and say, now you can be the heroes. You can help the magical hero or the magical creatures. And it's been such a fun project. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and I love every second of it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I know. That's so exciting just to hear how, you could just create the space for those who are probably not vegan, but then they love Harry Potter, and then they see this and they find a community. So what kind of events do you organize to bring this community together? What kind of campaigns have you taken on? Are your members vegan, or how can they join? Just give us the insider deets.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, there are a lot of our members, they're not vegan. We definitely do see a lot of vegan Harry Potter fans, of course, and when they find us, they love to get involved. But we're not trying to advocate to the vegans. We're trying to make the Wizarding World fandom the most compassionate and kindest fandom that there can be to animals. And so we're actually trying to seek out the Harry Potter fans who, are interested in helping animals, but haven't made that step yet. And we're trying to say, hey, look, we're in Harry Potter robes too. Do you know that you can help animals? Come on over, let's help you out, And so we do that through so many different fun educational initiatives. Like we have a book club that I'm hosting later this week or later this month. We're in April now, but so I think by the time this comes out, it'll already have been released. So go check it out on our YouTube. But we have a book club where we reread all of these Harry Potter books, and in each book we stop and we ask, what is the animal rights message here? What can we take from, the Snidget being replaced with a golden snitch? What kind of animal rights message can we apply from that book to our real world? We also have an educational podcast called Protego Cast that I created that is just so much fun, because each episode takes an animal rights message in the Harry Potter world and says, okay, let's explore that topic just a little bit more. Let's talk about why we shouldn't be afraid of boggarts. Let's talk about the mermaids and invading their space in the lake. Stuff like that, And then, of course, our social media presence is great. Our director of marketing, Valerie, does an amazing job just really creating a fun, welcoming space, but also an educational space and a nerdy space, right? We want to make room for people to be like, ooh, I'm excited about the new film too. And it's like, us too, So,
yeah. And yeah, that's, and you've had, I recall, was it last year or the year before that you had a campaign success with the Universal dropping the feature of live owls. Do you want to tell us about that campaign?
Yeah, I mean, no nonprofit advocacy organization is complete without the real bread and vegan butter of the group, which is the campaigns department, right? Having educational opportunities is fantastic, but as we've talked about earlier, my thoughts on that are we need some kind of mobilization. We need action, right? What do we do when people have learned what's going on in the world, and how do we take them and say, okay, you just learned this horrible thing. Now here's what you can do to stop it. And so we launched a campaign kind of through our Twitter account. God, I feel like a couple of years ago, where a Protego Foundation member went to Universal Osaka in Japan and was like, hey, did you all know that they have live photo ops with owls at the Wizarding World? And we were devastated to learn that, because nowhere else in the world had it. It was just in Osaka. And the photos that we received from this member were devastating. I mean, you saw these beautiful, gentle birds literally tied with rope to podiums so that people could come up and take photos. And, when we use animals as a photo prop, they're exposed to so many different things, including loud music, loud noise, flashing lights, being touched, handled. These are birds who are nocturnal, who don't want to be around people if they had the choice. But I think the real devastating part is seeing that beautiful, gentle bird tied to a podium. The Harry Potter series is so connected to owls, for better or for worse, but we are connected to owls. And so seeing owls like Hedwig, who we loved, who we mourned when she died, tied to podiums and exposed to that kind of stuff, it was devastating. So we really made a big stink. And I like to say that we we ruffled some feathers, if I can insert a pun there, to get that ended. And finally, Warner Brothers privately confirmed to me that nowhere in the world will there ever be live animals in any licensed Harry Potter productions, and that's including at all of the Wizarding World locations. So that was a really, really major victory for us.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I did see, I can't remember which news outlet, but I saw a photo of one of the owls, and you could see how sad they looked. Just their eyes, they're just chained to a podium, and it was really heartbreaking. And then when I learned of that, when I learned of that campaign victory, that's when I was like, wait, they were showcasing owls? So yeah. Oh, wow. I just thought of this because you did mention the issues of J.K. Rowling, the anti-trans commentary on her end, and your stance with anti-oppression and creating this Harry Potter themed group. Do you feel any sort of discrepancy within you, or have you gotten some sort of pushback on that? I'm just curious as to how you navigate that when, the author of one of the most inspiring, uniting books says, doesn't say the best thing about an oppressed group.
To say the least.
Yeah, so I'm just curious of your thoughts on how you want to come through it without having to feel like you need to let go of your love for Harry Potter.
Yeah, it was to say it was a devastating moment for our team would be a complete understatement. As you said, the book series represents so much about advocating for tolerance and acceptance and love. And the views that she was just throwing out there were the complete opposite of that. It was devastating, a devastating time. So immediately we knew that we had to ensure that people knew we built this fandom. The fans own this, not any one person, not any one company. The fans own this. And so we immediately worked with our fandom brothers and sisters and sister organizations and fan sites, and we all came together and put out the exact same trans solidarity statement that you can find on our website, protegofoundation.org, because we do want to ensure that, it's difficult to give up these stories that have shaped us and inspired us in so many different ways. I mean, the number of stories from trans fans who say that the Harry Potter series helped them feel comfortable and empowered to come out as trans. Like, I couldn't imagine what they're feeling right now. And so we wanted to ensure that space of love and acceptance continued. And luckily, being an organization that is trying to expand that circle of love and compassion to other beings, we knew that it was imperative for us to not only stay in this space, but continue to own it with our other advocacy organizations, with our other fan sites, and ensure that we're not going to let one Voldemort take down our Hogwarts.
Oh, wow. As someone I watched Harry Potter, I read the books, but I will definitely not call myself, as into the fandom. I enjoy them, but, that's about it. But that gave me goosebumps.
Good.
So I feel good about that. So, and I guess on the topic of Harry Potter, it's just kind of a creative question that I had. If you had to plan an ALF action in the wizarding world, what would you do?
Oh, this is probably the most fun question you've ever asked me. Luckily, we do see a little bit of ALF action in the wizarding world in a pretty official capacity. In Goblet of Fire, there's a chapter called the House Elf Liberation Front, which is a direct reference to the Animal Liberation Front of the UK. And in that chapter, Hermione, Ron, and Harry break into, I'm going to use break into in quotes, the kitchens where the elves used in houses are cooking in the kitchens and everything. And so I remember reading that for the first time after learning about the Animal Liberation Front and rereading that chapter and being like, wow, there's an ALF like reference in Harry Potter. You know, it just blew my mind. But I always have to say that there's one part in the entire Harry Potter series that I think sums up the most beautiful form of direct action. And it's in Deathly Hallows when Harry, Ron, and Hermione free the Ukrainian Iron Belly down in the vaults of Gringotts. And, you know, a lot of these animals who we're advocating for as activists have never seen light. They've never seen day. They've never felt grass under their feet. And so oftentimes those videos of beagles being released from laboratories and touching grass for the first time brings me to tears almost immediately. Like, bless everybody who works at Beagle Freedom Project. But also we see that in Harry Potter with this beautiful Ukrainian Iron Belly as she's climbing through the caves of Gringotts, breaking through that ceiling. And then finally there's a moment where you see her breathe fresh air for the first time. She sees the sky for the first time. She's no longer going to be beat. She's no longer going to be this victim of just pure abuse. And she gets to stretch her wings and fly for the first time. That moment always gets me so emotional because that's what I would want to do. I would want to go down, and she's not the only one. She's not the only dragon in the vaults of Gringotts. And so I would want to go down there and I would want to free every single one of them. I would want every dragon to feel that air for the first time.
Oh my God, I can see that visual making the press. I love it already.
That's right.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I love that answer. And I think I'm also just so amazed by how when you found a connection in the books to animal rights or vice versa, like you would go back and read the books and then find something new and let that spark your curiosity and creativity and how you could use that to do more good in the world. And that's, yeah, again, you never know who you're inspiring. And you know, and I also really respect how you handled the anti-trans commentary that came from J.K. Rowling and how the Wizarding World fandom community did come together to own their love for Harry Potter, to own what the stories stood for in empowering and encouraging people to really be unapologetically themselves. And I think that was really reassuring to many because it said, okay, I still have my community. My love for Harry Potter is still my love for Harry Potter. And there's no one who can take that magic away. And I think I think as activists, as those who are advocating for a better, kinder world for every living being, it's important to have these safe spaces and to make sure that we are not alienating one another because we're like, oh shoot, I like Harry Potter, but the author said something that I don't align with. So what do I do? And just staying quiet about it. But no, coming out and saying, okay, like this happened, but that doesn't change who we are at the core. So thank you to you and the rest of the community for creating such a beautiful, magical space for everyone to just have their own unique magic be expressed however they feel. So.
I love that.
Yeah. So I know I feel like we could just go off talking forever. I don't know about you, but I can.
Yeah, same. Definitely.
But I know you have a lot of magical creatures to save. So and some rowdy business to maybe get back to. So before I let you go, Tylor, I want to know what does a vegan world look like to you? How do you envision your ideal vegan world?
This might be a whole other episode because I don't want a vegan world, not in the like modern sense of the word, right? Like of the many amazing things that Black Indigenous activists of the global majority have been doing lately is the what is the word? The reclamation of the word vegan as a social justice movement term, as it originally was back in the day.
Yes. And that's, I think, how we at AAM are defining the word vegan as well, in that it's a social justice, anti-oppression message is where we want to come from, and not, I'm ordering a McPlant at McDonald's.
Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to track this down and find in the history when this happened, but like I could go on, but modern veganism is really just plant-based diet advocacy, and that will almost always leave out the anti-oppression aspect that it used to have. So I love that AAM is still keeping that fire alive. So for me, I guess, I want an anti-speciesist world. I want a world where every animal, human or non-human, is respected, free to live their lives in a way that is natural and important to them. I want a world that is just, fair, and absent of cruelty. Like essentially, I want a kind world.
Yeah, I think that's the word kind might be a very small word, but it's such a powerful and all-encompassing description of what we're going for. Like, is skinning an animal who probably doesn't want to be trapped in a fur farm in the first place kind? No. And I really liked that. I think there was a post that went around that said, replace the word vegan with kind to animals. Mm-hmm. And I think it's not that hard to grasp what we are going for. And I know a lot of capitalistic messaging gets in the way of making veganism a more plant-based, trendy thing, which is, to me, not what the core stands for. So I appreciate you kind of bringing that messaging as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I love that you all are doing that too. So major props.
Thank you. And is there anything else that you feel like we missed out that you want to add in? We'll of course be sure to link all the resources about Radicals and Revolutionaries, the Chick Peeps, the Protego Foundation, all in the show notes. But yeah, if there's anything else that you'd like to add.
I think the only thing is, I want people who are listening to like be ready to fail as activists, but remember to keep getting up and keep trying and keep getting up. Dust yourself off and just keep going. You're going to fail. You might fail again. You might fail a third time. But as long as you keep getting up and trying, that's all the animals can ask for.
Exactly. And after, I think once you find your community, you don't see it as failure anymore. You see it more as, okay, it's a challenge, or it's kind of it's a learning opportunity to see that, okay, this didn't work. Let's see how we can reevaluate. Again, to bring the cranky vegans, the metaphorical puzzle. It's like, okay, like now let's try to organize the pieces a little differently. And you think of it that way. And I think, and you find your people, create your community. If you don't have one, join us at AAM, join the team at Protego Foundation, and just find your crew and fight the good fight for everybody, because we need everyone on deck doing the best that they can for a kinder world. So
that's right.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you again so much, Tylor. This has been just such a joy. I couldn't have asked for a better day. I think it's like just about noon here, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to call it a day and go to bed, because it's been good. I don't want anything to ruin it.
No, I really appreciate this. And yeah, thank you to everybody at AAM for everything that you're doing. Honestly, one of my favorite organizations and groups to follow now. So please keep it up. We need you all.
Yes, I think we all need one another. And let's grow this small animal rights world into just the norm. That's how everybody lives. Let that be the philosophy we all live by. So
that's right.
Yeah. Until next time, my friend, this was wonderful. We, as a community of activists, are also creators of the good kind of magic. It's fueled by our passion for a kind and compassionate world for all living beings. I mean, sure, I guess it would be cool to have a cloak, a wand, a flying broom while we're at it. But hey, one can dream, right? You may also be excited to know that the Protego Foundation recently launched a vegan cookbook featuring delicious recipes inspired by comforting and indulgent delicacies of the wizarding world. As always, we will be sure to link all that information in the show notes. And remember, as Tylor so eloquently says, it is our responsibility as those with any form of privilege to advocate for those oppressed by unfair systems of power. Collective liberation is key. And to achieve that, we must not only protect the vulnerable, but also empower and uplift them in the eyes of our society. Now, before we sign off, please take a quick minute to rate and review the podcast. It helps others find it more easily, and the more people that find us, the more they can be inspired by the guests we interview on our show and turn that into actionable change for all animals. Don't forget to check out our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Animal Activism Mentorship, where you can keep up with the podcast as well as all things AAM. Accessibility to our content without any hindrance is key to our work here at AAM. That's why it's important to us that we offer our resources for free. So if you like what we do at the Animal Liberation Hour and at AAM and would like to support us, of course, given you have the financial ability to do so, please feel free to contribute to our Patreon. It helps keep us going. Animal Activism Mentorship is so proud and honored to be fueled by Farm Animal Rights Movement. One more reminder that you can sign up for a free mentor to help you with your activism at animalactivismmentorship.com. So if you're still looking for that sign that you need to be an activist for the animals, here you go. And remember, it will take all of us to achieve animal liberation. So let's stay focused, positive, support one another, and be the change of compassion that we envision for this world. Until next time.